Well, you beautiful degenerates, I started watching the snippet of Trump's recent appearance on Theo Von's podcast where they talk about drug addiction. I got 1 minute into it and I realized I had to film a candid reaction to this. So just so you know, I've only seen 1 minute of this and now I'm going to film a full reaction to it because this conversation is absolutely ridiculous. And with that being said, hit the intro, eh? What the fuck is going on, YouTube? It's Ashcon, aka Dropped Out Beats, back again with another Addiction Neuroscientist Reacts video. For those just tuning into the channel, I'm a trained addiction neuroscientist and hip-hop producer, and this is a part of a series where I react to a variety of entertainers, celebrities, athletes discussing their experience with drug use, whether it be firsthand or secondhand, and today we have a very special guest. He's not on my podcast, he's on Theo Von's podcast, and we're going to react to the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, talking about drug addiction and sobriety. Shout out to Theo Von for having Trump on the podcast. Hope you guys like the content here. If you do, hit the subscribe, hit the like. With that being said, I'm going to throw my headphones on, make my big, hitting microphones over here. Make my big ugly head small, and we are going to listen to what Donald and Theo have to say. Let's get into it.
Yeah. I noticed at the events you don't drink, and you don't drink or smoke, right?
I don't drink or smoke.
You never have?
No, I never have. I had a great brother who taught me a lesson. Don't drink. And he said don't smoke. He smoked and he drank, and he was...
Don't drink. Don't smoke. It's very bad for you. Don't drink.
Great guy. He was a very handsome guy.
Is he older? He was older?
Quite a bit older, yeah. And he had a problem with alcohol and smoke a lot. But, I tell people, no drugs, no drinking, no cigarettes.
Yeah.
I tell that to my kids all the time.
All of those things are drugs.
Say no drugs, no drinking, no smoke. And...
it was tough.
He'd always tell me, he'd say never. So he was, really old enough that you would look up to somebody, and I'd look up to him anyway.
Did you admire him?
Yeah, I admired so much about him. He had so much going. He had the look. He
what was his name?
Unbelievable personality, like an incredible personality.
What was his name, Donald?
His name was Fred Trump. And he had a problem with alcohol. He got addicted to it because they say alcohol is tougher than drugs to get off of. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I'm in recovery, actually. I've been in...
That is... Let me transition to make my face bigger so you guys can see the disappointment on my face. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Alcohol is just another drug. Okay, I'm going to shut up for now. We'll keep letting these dinguses talk.
I've been in recovery, most of the last 10 years.
From alcohol?
From drugs and alcohol.
So which is worse?
For me, drugs is the problem, but if I have a drink, then it's tougher for me to prevent myself from getting...
Okay, I gotta pause again because I'm just a little disappointed in Theo for allowing the distinction between drugs and alcohol when I'm pretty sure Theo knows that alcohol is just another drug. There's no difference between alcohol and cocaine or heroin. All drugs are just drugs. All psychoactive drugs are just psychoactive drugs. And so I'm a little disappointed in Theo for being like, hey, yeah, while the illegal drugs were the main problem for me, I'm pretty sure Theo, he's talked about his cocaine addiction. Alcohol drives me to use those illegal drugs. That makes total sense. But it should have been made clear from Theo's perspective that alcohol is just another drug, of which he also struggles with alcohol. Okay, let's get back into it.
It's off a chain.
Yeah.
But which is harder to quit? I've heard alcohol is harder to quit than drugs, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine because
it doesn't make any fucking sense at all.
Probably more readily available.
And it's social, and you're sitting and everyone's drinking and all.
Yeah, rarely do you go to a dinner and everybody's eating Xanaxes or something, you know, for
Yeah, right.
appetizers. Usually people are having like a mint, you know, a mint julep or something a little fancier, Negroni I just learned about.
Right.
But yeah,
So you have a problem with that then?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've had, it's been in my family. My family, it's like, yeah,
Can
it's
you
tough.
can you stay away from it?
Yeah, I've done a good job. I mean,
So how long have you been off?
I go to recovery meetings. I've been off most recently a little over 2 years.
Do you ever go back on?
Yeah, I've had stints where I go back on
And you don't control it?
it's tough. It goes downhill
No
pretty
kidding.
quick.
So
You think it's going to be
you
easy.
think you're controlling it?
And then you're damn.
Boy,
Yeah, you're
that's
doing
tough.
your go-kart and racing
So
with
the only
hookers
way
and
you
stuff.
can
It gets
do
bad.
Is just not to do it, right?
Right. So then in the end, you're like,
You go karting with hookers and stuff. Theo's fucking hilarious, man. But I think this narrative, let me make myself big again. I think this narrative that, you know, there's drugs and there's alcohol, and, you know, which one is harder to quit, alcohol or drugs? We don't know. I think that really kind of reinforces the idea that, you know, alcohol is a little bit more morally acceptable, even though they are kind of talking about alcohol as, at least Donald is kind of saying that alcohol is almost more harmful because it is harder to quit. Like, at least Donald is acknowledging that alcohol is an addictive substance and it is very difficult to quit. I don't know if they'll go into, like, you know, alcohol withdrawal and how serious that can be, but we've talked about that plenty already on this channel. But I think that idea that there's drugs and there's alcohol allows us to continue to demonize every other drug that isn't alcohol, and it allows us to make any other drug that isn't alcohol illegal, because alcohol is already legal. And, you know, alcohol, while people have a problem with it, you know, drugs are more morally wrong. And I don't think there's a moral case for drug use at all. It's morally neutral behavior. It's amoral behavior. It doesn't matter if you use drugs or you don't. You either do or you don't. And you can list the drugs that you do use, and you can list the drugs that you don't use. And if you have a problem with a particular drug, and you come off of that drug and you say, hey, that drug is a problem for me, I start, you know, go-karting with hookers, for example, and I don't need to be doing that, then that's totally reasonable to say, like, hey, you know, I use caffeine, like, I still am a drug user in that I use caffeine, but I'm sober from the drugs that I had a problem with and that caused me to struggle in my life. But so, yeah, I think that idea that drugs and alcohol are two different things, that it allows us to reinforce that alcohol is acceptable. It's okay to drink while it's not okay to do drugs. And I just don't think that's right.
I have to not do it. Did you see, like, with your brother, could you see it or anything? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Man.
I
that's
was
a bummer.
amazed because he had so much going, he had everything going. I think it happened in college at a fraternity maybe, or I don't know, somewhere along the line it happened, and all of a sudden, you know, this is not unique. This is a very common story, unfortunately, but and then the family would see it and start to notice it, and it didn't get better. It didn't get better. I was amazed. You know, he lived for so long in bad conditions, you know, in terms of, I was amazed that his body could hold out. It held out, and it had bad moments, but his body was unbelievably strong that it could withstand this.
Yeah, it's a body.
You know,
Your body's just so resilient.
Yeah.
Do you remember the
So that is a good point, because I think if you've been around drug addiction and people who struggle with addiction, if you've ever, for example, if you've ever been around, you know, someone with an alcohol use disorder, someone who is an alcoholic, and you see how much they can drink, it is truly baffling to someone who, I mean, even if you do drink, if you don't drink regularly, the amount that an alcoholic or someone with an alcohol use disorder can consume is truly mind-blowing. It's like, wow, you can drink that much and then keep walking around. Like, I would have thrown up, passed out, probably have had to have called the ambulance for me by now. Like, it gets crazy. And so that is a good point, that, you know, when you can recognize those things, it's really starting to go downhill. And so, yeah, it's rough. Addiction is rough.
last time that you saw him or spent with him?
I do, and
I'm sorry to ask you about it. Is it all
Yeah,
right?
no, it's well, the reason it's good talking about it.
Yo, shout out to Theo and Donald. I mean, there's no chance in hell I would ever vote for Donald Trump. I do think he's hilarious. I wish he wasn't running for the president to be of the United States. I wish he was just like #1 comedian in the United States of like making fun of politicians. That would be great. But yeah, shout out to Theo and Donald for having the real conversation. Shout out.
It might help other people. If it helps one other person, it's worth the conversation.
We talk about that stuff a lot on our podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of our audience struggles or has struggled with alcoholism, addiction, intimacy disorders, all types of stuff. So it's like it's pretty kind of normal conversation. But
the interesting thing is, and I tell people, so I never had a cigarette, and I've never had a glass of alcohol. And my brother was incredible. He would tell me, because he knew he had a problem, and he'd say, don't ever drink, don't ever smoke. He'd always add smoking, because he did smoke a lot, which is, not very healthy. But he'd say, don't.
Not very healthy. Smoking cigarettes is incredibly unhealthy, and you will die from smoking cigarettes if you smoke cigarettes.
Ever drink, don't ever drink. He'd tell me every time. I said, don't ever drink, because he knew he had this addiction. And I never had a glass of alcohol. Never, ever did I have a glass of alcohol because of him. And I would say that if I did drink, I could, conceivably be the type of personality that would have, like you, that would have a problem. But I never had. And the only thing I say to people is, if too late for the people that you're talking about, but if you don't drink, you don't miss it. I mean, I don't even think about alcohol or
right. It's not a part of your world.
I don't think about cigarettes. I don't think about any of that. If you don't take drugs or if you don't have alcohol, it's real easy not to drink it. It's when I had a friend who went to the Wharton School of Finance with me. He was a very smart guy.
Where is it, Wharton School?
That's in Philadelphia. That's at Penn.
Oh yeah, Rocky.
Right, and it's a great school, great business school, and it's part of the University of Pennsylvania, the business school.
Oh, it's nice down there.
Yeah,
my friend's brother went there or something.
Well,
we ate near there once.
Then he was smart because it's a great school.
And,
but this person that I met, he hated the taste of scotch. Hated it. Couldn't stand it. But he insisted on having it because he felt it was important to be able to drink. I said, no, just don't drink. He said, to be successful in business, you have to sort of interact and you have to drink. And I said, don't do it. Anyway, he became an unbelievable alcoholic. Uncontrollable alcoholic.
Oh, I thought you meant like one of the best.
Yeah, and he died. He was but he hated the taste of scotch.
And
he couldn't live without it.
Wow.
Literally.
Well, I think I noticed a lot of.
We would probably have to fact check that story. I don't know about that, but this idea that, if you don't ever do drugs, you don't miss it. Okay, fine, that's true. If you've never done drugs, you don't miss it, and I guess you don't care about what you're missing out on. But I will say that it's most likely the case that you do use drugs because you've probably had to go to the doctor and take drugs. Maybe Donald has broken a bone. He's used an opioid before because the doctor has prescribed it to him, so he has used drugs in that case. But, he's talking about how he doesn't miss drinking because he's never drank before, but I always like the saying that you can never trust a man who doesn't take a drink because they're unwilling to, reveal to you some secrets. And so, Donnie, what you got hiding over there that you can't take a drink with us beautiful degenerates over here and chop it up and let the truth out of what you really doing over there. Anyway, let's get back into it.
Like in the recovery rooms and stuff, it's a lot of people that they're missing something inside of them. And so they take on so they want to try and fill it up with something else. Yeah. Do you remember the last time you spent with your brother?
I do. And he'd have periods where he'd get sick, very sick. And we thought we'd lose him or we lost him. Then he'd get better. And that happened 5 or 6 times. I mean, where you thought you lost him. And then he got better. And it was amazing. I mean, he was, certainly very strong in that sense. And I just tell people it's so tragic don't drink. Just don't drink.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have a problem. Like even you, if you didn't drink, you would never, but you probably maybe wouldn't be successful like you are. You know, it's part of your story, right?
It's helped me a lot. Yeah, because I don't know what would happen probably. I think it's just too risky.
It is risky.
What's something that you miss about him, or like that? Like what's something that you miss about him, Fred?
Well, he was wise in a sense. I mean, think of it. He's got this problem, and it was very important for him to convey to me not to have this problem. And I couldn't have been successful if I had that problem.
Yeah.
If I had that problem, and I think maybe I'm a personality type where I could have had the problem if I drank. But if you don't drink, you're never going to have it. I mean, I don't miss when I see somebody light up a cigarette and just they're in heaven. I don't miss that at all.
It's weird. It's so it's very Native American too.
Isn't it crazy?
Bizarre. And I think sometimes our older brothers, they kind of like, they take the speed bumps for us, like as younger brothers, so that we don't have to. You know what I'm saying? Does that, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like my brother went through a lot of stuff so that I didn't have to go through it. And then,
As an older brother, yeah, all us older siblings, we all go through the shit so that we can educate you younger degenerates to be better than us.
And I get to see him and learn.
Is he okay now?
Yeah, he's doing great now. But it's like, yeah, that's one of the blessings I think of having an older brother.
Well, you can learn through history too, even if it's not a brother, it's by watching other people. I mean, you can see if you have a friend who's an alcoholic, or even just by reading about people, you can learn.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a brother, but in this case, it was very personal. It was a brother, and I learned not to drink, and I learned not to smoke cigarettes. Now, I don't know that I would have smoked cigarettes. I probably would have drank. I think, there's no reason not to drink, but I had a reason because he told me, just
that was it.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. That was kind of a blessing then, huh?
Yeah.
And where did you guys ever do anything fun together? Like one nice memory that you have with him?
He had a great talent for flying. He was a pilot.
Oh, sweet.
And he loved it. And
did you ever fly with him?
I did. I flew with him. He was a great pilot and very talented. Other pilots would come to his house to study with him.
Watch him fly.
And he was really talented but ultimately he had to give that because of the alcohol. He had to give that up, which was a hard thing for him to do, but he had to give that up.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I can't believe that I got to be able to sit down with you. I'm grateful to Dana White as well for setting this up. And
of course, Dana White set this up. But yeah, shout out to Theo Von and former President Donald Trump for having the real conversation on Theo Von's This Past Weekend podcast. It was a pretty good, authentic conversation. I'll give it to him. And since it was an authentic conversation from them, I thought I had to give a candid, no science planned out, authentic, candid reaction. And so overall, kind of my thoughts on this is that semi-wise words from Donald, I don't know. I don't personally tell people don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs. I say that you need to learn if it is responsible for you to use, and if you feel that you might have a problem with it, don't do it. If you have a long-running history of addiction in your family, for example, if your mom was an alcoholic and her dad was an alcoholic and their dad was an alcoholic, the likelihood that you develop an alcohol use disorder is much higher. So you can do things to mitigate that. If you do end up deciding to drink, try to drink later in your life. If you do end up deciding to drink later in your life, don't get actually drunk. The dose, makes the poison is the first rule of toxicology, and I think that's a wise kind of way to go when dealing with drugs. Always start small, and so that way you mitigate a lot of the risk by starting small. In the case of someone who might have a hereditary propensity for an alcohol use disorder, just by only having one beer and then cutting themselves off, they could significantly decrease the likelihood that they develop an alcohol use disorder because they don't actually get drunk and start to feed into this addiction pathway in your brain. What else did I want to say here? Yeah, I think I'd just like to close by saying, it's fine. It's fine to do drugs. It's not a moral act like we've already talked about. But what I don't like is when we act like there are some drugs that are morally acceptable and, I'm guilty as charged. I live my life thinking that a lot, you know, oh, I drink, I don't do drugs, I'm a better person. And then the more I learn about drugs, the more I'm like, oh, shit, well, all drugs are just drugs. And so I think it's actually very freeing to understand that all drugs are just drugs and that there's no moral consternation that you should feel about doing any one particular type of drug. You shouldn't feel morally wrong about developing a drug addiction. Either you should just recognize your struggle, kind of the way Donald's brother did, Fred Trump, as he said. He recognized he had a problem, and he was telling his younger siblings, like, hey, don't do this. You might develop a problem. And I think we can all agree, even Donald seems to agree, that he has a personality type that might have a propensity for developing an addiction. I also this just popped into my head, but, you know, Donald's brother being a pilot, people don't really understand the extent of high functioning addiction that we have in the world. Like, just because someone is struggling with an addiction doesn't mean that they can't be the top CEO of a company, or a pilot, for example, or the president of the United States. I mean, the drug use doesn't always hinder the person like we typically think, that, you know, oh, they start using drugs, they become homeless, their life spirals out of control, they're divorced, they're homeless, they have no money, they're spending all their money on drugs, they're prostituting themselves. Like, that's not what always happens. And so I think it's better to understand the nuance and the real, how rounded and how, you know, different everyone can be that struggles with a drug addiction. Because, you know, we could go from a top CEO dealing with a drug addiction to a homeless person that's prostituting themselves dealing with a drug addiction. And so I think it's super important to kind of understand that drugs don't affect everyone the same way in that regard. And we kind of see that with Donald's brother, that, you know, he was a functioning pilot. Yeah, so anyway, please hit the like. If you like this video, comment down below. If you have something to say, I appreciate all of you beautiful degenerates tuning into the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hear from you guys in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Trying to grow this channel of a bunch of beautiful degenerates. You know what I'm talking about. With that being said, peace out.
We would learn together and experience together how to reach the 5 levels of consciousness which are available to a species like ours.
Drop out.